Hey guys, welcome back to our
Real Love Scenario.
Shout out to all our real lovers out there. We are back in our happy
Hey,
place.
everybody. Hey,
It feels so
everybody.
good to be back.
For sure.
Did you check out our episode with Cody, Elaine, Oliver from Black Love, the brand?
Yes, it was so soothing. I
So
told her
soothing.
during the taping, after the taping, your voice is just
So
feels
gentle.
like a hug. Just feels like a hug. And listening back to it, I was like, yes, it definitely feels like that. Mm-hmm.
So gentle, so soft. How you been, Rhonda?
Good. Life be lifing.
Life
But
do
good.
be lifing.
Yes, I'm always great once I'm here. So
Good,
that's
good,
all that
good.
matters. That's all that matters. How you been?
I've been good. A lot of travels, a lot of
Yeah.
cool things. I want to shout out my friends Asin and Jackie. They just got married.
Oh, nice.
And then they just had their baby a few days ago. So it's
Okay.
like they timed up the wedding perfectly to boom, wedding. It was in Richmond, and then they had the baby.
That's so cool.
Not too far after that.
That's
But I think it's so cool because I had the pleasure of seeing their relationship blossom and all the things that they've gone through. Asin, we knew each other in high school,
Oh,
and we
wow.
were roommates all throughout college.
And they've been together since high school?
They've been together since college,
Okay,
freshman year. He used to. It's funny. We always mess with him and Jackie and say your name was homework, because he used to always be like, "Yo, I'm about to go do homework." And then we started to find out. Remember one day we kind of followed him, and he hopped in a car, and we was like,
Oh, this homework?
"Oh, this homework. Oh,
That's cute. I feel like women are always known for naming people, giving them some secret little code name, but that's a good one. Homework.
yeah." But to be able to see their journey and everything that they've gone through, overcame, and now at this point to where they're the best I've ever seen them. My
Yeah.
friend Asin is the best I've ever seen him, and just really in a good place, and seeing that come
sweet.
full circle just gave me a lot of perspective on love, and just makes
Yeah.
me really, really happy in
Yes.
that moment. So
It's good to see that, right? Because, we live in this toxic space sometimes where it's everybody will really make you think that's not still happening.
exactly.
Yes, I was just talking to, I don't know who I was talking to, but I'm excited because I'm going to one wedding this year, and I haven't been to a wedding in 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm I want to go to more of these. Obviously my own, but I want to go to more weddings. So, real lovers, if you in the DMV area, I'll come through.
I mean, we'll crash a few
For sure.
if you
I
want
love
to.
weddings.
Yeah.
They just such good vibes.
For sure.
Yes.
Especially if y'all doing the destination joint, let me know. But also I went to podcast moving in Denver, so that was really cool. Just being around a lot of podcasters,
Yeah.
having a lot of conversations, and ran into some people who were fans of our show out there. So it was nice to meet them. I feel bad because the names escape me.
I'm sure
right
you
now.
met a lot
of people, but
Yeah.
it was just some really dope relationships, and just hearing a lot of people's podcast ideas or the premise of their shows was just yo, this is really cool. And if you like podcasting and love the space, being in a place to where everybody has that same kind of obsession
Yeah.
and love for it, then it's
Yeah.
kind of this is cool. 'Cause
These are my people.
You kind of talk shop a little bit,
Yeah, yeah.
and people really, really get it. So that was cool.
Good.
So now I'm here. It was 100 degrees in Denver, which I
Ooh.
didn't know it gets that hot. But now I'm
Jesus.
back in the DMV, and I'm happy to be here so we can record our show. But
Yes.
as I was talking about our real lovers, let's go to our real lover shout out.
My favorite part of the show.
For sure, this was from B Niche.
Okay.
The reason I re-downloaded the podcast app.
Ooh.
That's just fire
Come
right there.
on. Put the app back on a device.
Ooh.
I see you, B Niche. What B
5-star.
Niche said?
Now, who would have thought I'd be 34 and listen to a podcast while I drive? This podcast has been eye-opening, cathartic, and a perfect weekly regimen to help heighten my self-awareness. I was sent a clip from a friend on IG, and I immediately hit follow. It's rare that I come across sound wisdom with all of the clutter, gossip, and banter on Al Gore's internet, but finding this podcast couldn't have happened at a better time. Thank you for the transparency, the perspectives, the openness, and the conviction, LOL. I've already started applying the advice and takeaways that have yielded a better relationship. Love y'all for real. # real lover.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
trying to tell y'all, real love, y'all got to step up. That was good right there.
And this a new listener. Welcome to the family. You
Shout
getting
out-
your plate at the cookout first.
For sure. Shout out to all the people who number one, share our clips
Yes.
with their friends.
Yeah.
And that's how people discover us. But shout out to all the people that came from clips, like completely organic. You just like saw it and was like, you know, sometimes people see it and they're like, that was cool. That was great advice. And then they go about their day. But shout out to y'all who was like, what is this? Let me dig a little deeper and figure out who these people are. And then you became a listener that way. So we appreciate y'all.
All smiles, almost all my teeth, man. That's exciting. I
don't even think I think it was before the other show. I don't know if we recorded, but you know, we hit number 34.
Oh, word. We definitely did not talk about it on the pod.
We hit number 34 on the top relationship charts on Apple.
Let's clap it up.
Let's clap
it up for ourselves, man.
Come on.
Let's clap it up. Y'all clap with us.
Accomplishment for the Real Lovers and Real Love Scenario group. Like, if you guys don't know, I run the podcast network for Urban One right now. So I get a lot of perspective on podcasts. I get pitched a lot of podcasts. I know how a lot of podcasts are performing. And they're on Apple are like 2.5 million podcasts.
Yeah.
2.5 million. And to be in the top 50 in your category is like
impressive.
Insane.
Yes, it's not easy. And we really couldn't do it without you. Like, yes, we see here, we create the content, but you can't chart without listens. And it just means the world. It means the world to us.
For sure.
That was very exciting. My friend Ty, who's also a podcaster, she has a dope podcast, really short form, self-care in real life. So plug. But she was like, listen, I gotta say this. Like, it's not easy. Like, what you all have done is not easy. And it's not, you know, just to chart, because I think the chart is 1 through 200, like primarily on Apple.
Yeah.
Just to crack the 200 is difficult, but to crack the top 50 is like even harder. So we're amongst great company and to the moon, as I always say.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's exciting because it's not, that top chart isn't like, ethnicity focused or like it's not like man or woman focused.
It's
or
not based in region.
It's not region. It's the United States.
Yes, exactly. It is literally every podcast in this country that falls in said category.
Exactly.
That's a lot, y'all.
That's a lot.
Thank you. Keep the listens going.
Thank you so much. So let's go to our real life love scenario.
Let's do it.
Let's go. So Rhonda and I have brought this up in a previous episode where we were talking about child support, and we was like, we got to dedicate a different time or a different moment to this.
Yes.
But basically, Halle Berry has hit the news. Shout out to Halle Berry.
Shout out to Halle Berry. And also shout out to Chloe and Halle real quick, who I just want us to know that it's pronounced the same way.
It is.
It is not Haley.
No, I see.
It's Halle, y'all.
You know what got me is that like I was seeing like her go for interviews on radio and do all these things, and I'm like, y'all pronouncing her name wrong.
It's Halle.
Y'all would have think you would have did the research, you know, first before saying Haley.
Yeah.
Halle, but she's so gracious and so nice. I'm sure she gets it all the time. So where she's just like,
what a sweet person she seems to be. Goodness gracious. But I wanted to make that PSA because I'm like, if I hear y'all call her Haley one more time. I got
energy that if you come to Rhonda and saying Rhonda or something like that, she definitely gonna correct you. Yeah. She ain't letting that roll off the.
No, our names matter. They matter. So let's get them right. She deserves to be called her correct name. So think of Halle Berry when you think of Chloe and Halle. All right.
Yes, there we go. Yes. So Halle Berry finalized divorce from Oliver Martinez and will have to pay over $8,000 a month in child support for their son. So I mean, this is one of the rare situations to where we see, not saying it's more rare, I guess, that we see the mother of the child actually paying child support to the father.
Yeah.
But this just goes into a larger discussion because we have these everyday situations to where there's child support, and a lot of times we know that it's based off of income, right? Yeah. Of whoever is giving the support. A lot of times it's whoever has. Yeah. Is it based off of custody or is it what is it?
So it's
whoever has the highest income. I guess
it's usually off of who has the highest income, but it can also be increased based on who has if there's a primary versus a joint. Yeah. If there's primary, typically. And if the higher earner is not the primary, then they tend to pay more. Yeah. In their situation, it's joint custody.
For sure.
But because she's the higher earner, exactly, she has to pay him.
So I believe when it comes to child support that, and this more, I guess, applies to more high income earners, is that I think that we should put like a cap on the number of, how much somebody should be able to receive in child support. Because it's like, I know that the idea behind it is that there is not a lifestyle drop off when the person goes from one parent to another parent.
Right.
But I do think, and I think, that system was put in place for a reason, and I do understand the benefits of that. However, I do think that we have to continually adjust, and evaluate how certain systems are, because I do think it's flawed.
Yeah.
I do think that,
Agreed.
whenever you do have a system, there will be people who would try to figure out how to manipulate the system and find loopholes. And child support is not spousal support.
Yeah.
It's not alimony, to where the money should be, supporting fully the life of
the other parent. Yeah.
So it's trying to find that balance, because I've seen situations where it has been taken advantage of and has been manipulated. So what's your opinion on child support and how, that situation is handled in today's world?
Yes. Like, I understand that child support in the system itself is necessary. Unfortunately, it's very unfortunate that it's necessary, but it's usually in a situation where the other person is not necessarily willing to pay.
Very true.
There's an adversarial situation that now the courts have had to get involved in, because these two people can't work together to come up with something that makes sense. There are plenty of people who abuse the system, whether it's your cousin down the street who's abusing the system, or the celebrities that abuse the system because they see it as
a meal ticket.
Absolutely. Like, many people have even, it's songs about it, but people have done it. I ain't gonna say no names because I'm sure they would deny that that's what they did. But where they have a baby with a person and with the intention to get high child support. That we've heard that a million times over. So I think it's just unfortunate that two people can't put their heads together around raising their child from a financial perspective. I do agree with you that I think there needs to be a cap based on earnings. So, like, it can't just be a flat cap, but like, if you earn between this and this, and then you kind of maybe do some sort of research into what type of lifestyle a child who is birthed in this type of dynamic, what it would cost for this child to have a life, because it's not as simple as like when I was being raised. Like, I didn't need security. Some of these children, that is an expense that has to happen because society and public and media will follow these kids to school. They will go above and beyond and do really crazy things. So that becomes an expense, not just to the parent, but to the kid. They have to go to schools that probably are more expensive, not just because of the educational perspective, but also, again, that security perspective. Yes, they probably do want their kids to be a bit more worldly. So they have them in certain things that, again, my cousin down the street may not be able to put their kid in ballet, or violin, things that aren't as inexpensive as football or baseball, So I think it needs to move around based on the income, for sure. I was just looking to see like who pays the most child support, because people are like, $8,000 honestly ain't that bad. What Halle Berry has to pay is not that bad in comparison to like probably her earnings, but also her net worth.
Yeah.
And I think between Kanye West and Diddy, they both pay roughly like $50,000 to $55,000 per month per child. So Kanye West's child support to Kim Kardashian is $200,000 a month.
Wow.
Yes. And now, is he a higher earner than Halle Berry? Yes, I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so it's like not, it's your situation, so you probably don't ever want to have to shovel out this money to somebody else and trust that they'll do right by it. But 8,000, I think the trickier part are the smaller things in the divorce settlement, which is she still has to pay for all of the child's really like main expenses.
Yeah.
She has to pay for education. She has to pay for insurance. So this is on top of giving him the $8,000.
So I think that's where people feel like the system is flawed, right? It's like, all right, I'm shoveling out all this money, but then I'm also paying for all these things outside of it. So if I'm paying for education, if I'm paying for insurance, if, you know, our kid needs a new car, I'm paying for the car because I'm a higher earner. Or like I'm doing all these things, trying to figure out, like, if I'm shoving out, let's say 25K, if I'm a very high earner, like a celebrity or something, or 30K, like, where, like, what am I actually paying for at this point?
Yeah.
And the thing is, and the truth is that even if I'm a high earner and I have a huge house, like in most places in the US outside of like New York, maybe San Francisco and Silicon Valley, something like that, like when it comes to a 2-bedroom for 3,500 to 4,000, you could probably get like a nice, you know, spot. And even like a house, you know, if you're in like Atlanta or Texas or something like that, just that alone, you know, could have you sitting good. So to think that $30,000, like there's some people who are paying like you said, $200,000 in child support a month. It just is pretty insane.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, you know, and I'm sure that there's reasons for the things. I think to the whole thing, like a car, that's not court ordered, right? So
for sure.
realistically, I probably would be the one doing it because I make the most money, but the judge doesn't require me to do that. The judge is requiring her to maintain insurance for the child, requiring her to pay the school bill. So, you know, it's unfortunate, and their divorce has taken so long. I think they've been divorcing longer than they were married. So that tells you straight up and down that these two people cannot work together. There's no reason for, if both of you just want out the marriage and things are pretty clean, it would not have taken you like 8 years to get divorced.
For sure.
So if you can't agree on that, surely you're not going to agree on the child. And that's when these systems have to come in place and make you do these things.
That's why they're necessary in moments like that. But kudos to all the people, because I know there are a ton of people who don't use that system at all because they were able to come to a mutual agreement and just say like, hey, this is what I'll do. This is what I'll contribute. I'll pay for this. You pay for that. And they're like, we can just handle it on our own versus having to go to court. Because those situations, like I've seen how it can, like, it's not even about the money. Really, it's just a thing to where you're just trying to get revenge or retaliate. I'm just going to bleed you dry because how you treated me. I'm going to do this. And sometimes it starts to even become less about the child and more about whatever beefs
just
or
the punishment
issues that those two people have. So
it's sad.
It's sad.
It really, really is. And it's sad that it even has to come to that for some people. Like I know people who had to.
Yeah, for sure.
Like they felt like, I cannot raise this child on my income. Like I have to force you to contribute. Like I've talked about my mom before, where my mother chose not to. Although many of us, my siblings' moms did file and put my dad on child support. My mother definitely needed the money, could have used the money, but she did not feel like forcing him to be a father. She felt like if he's choosing not to financially be a dad, I'm gonna deal with it. I'm gonna just, that's that. He gonna have to deal with that with him and his God. You know, that was her mindset. So best wishes. Look, sorrows and prayers.
For sure. Best wishes to them. Hope they figure it out.
Yes. And that baby he halfway there. I think he's like 9 or 10.
For sure. And then it's like, you know, that baby gonna be cared for regardless.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that man not broke.
Nope.
The daddy not broke.
Nope, not at all.
He's not. He's not. All right, let's jump into our real life scenario. Our real life scenario this week. It comes from Anonymous. She says, my boyfriend and I have been together since we were 18. We are now 23. Our relationship hit a rough patch last year as we both got started in our careers and had less time for each other. We constantly bickered and were quick to say toxic things to hurt the other. I would say hurtful things targeting his masculinity, such as how he would never be enough for me, how he was always effing up, and he wasn't making me happy. Looking back at this now, I'm embarrassed and disappointed in myself to realize I was projecting my own childhood trauma onto him every time I was overwhelmed or felt let down by him. This came from never being enough for my parents and constantly being told so. This is something I unfortunately wouldn't come to terms with until after I caught my boyfriend emotionally cheating on me with a friend of his, and this is after I went through his phone. While they never saw each other or were physically intimate, she sent workout pictures showing off her backside, and he often told her she was pretty and that he was obsessed with her. He told me he did this because of our rough patch, that my degrading comments made him feel less of a man, and he needed to feel like he could at least make one person happy since it wasn't me. While I can understand the low feeling he felt and why he did it, the bottom line is that he should have told me about it or ended the relationship first. The person who I thought was the love of my life suddenly became a stranger, as even despite our problems, I never once thought he was capable of infidelity. He gave me some space to think about where I wanted to go from there. It was a tough inner battle for me, as I was always the person that said I would never forgive cheating. However, coming to terms with the fact that I was not a great girlfriend and led this man to feel so mentally low, I was able to consider a second chance if it meant we would come out of this as better people, together and individually. After agreeing to be more open about our feelings and to remove this person from his life completely, we decided to try again in our relationship. And 4 months later, he has become a much better partner. He is more communicative about his feelings. He listens to mine. He answers any questions I randomly have about the incident and will offer reassurance. He leaves his phone out in case I ever want to go through it again. And I have completely stopped with the degrading comments as I see the damage they can wield. We have, of course, argued since then as I try to mend my trust issues, but he has even started therapy to control his anger issues and his frustration, as well as his feelings of guilt. I love my boyfriend and I see the effort he has put in to make me feel secure in his relationship and this relationship. However, a part of me just cannot move on. Even with my degrading comments, I don't view his actions as my fault. I want to believe that a person in love would never cheat on their person, no matter how much of a low point they are in. I also can't get past the social media idea of once a cheater, always a cheater. I know that these things take time, but I'm not sure how long it should take. We do not live together, so I know I'm young enough to just cut my losses and walk away, but the idea of that kills me. Is it wrong for me to kill any chance we have at the future we've always talked about due to this grave mistake? After infidelity, is it simply past the point of no return? Oh, thank you, Anonymous.
Thank you, Anonymous. And shout out to Rhonda. You read through that smoothly, and that was great. I know that was a long one right there.
Yes. And it's so much more that I had to, remove, but she gave all the details, all of them.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting scenario, and there's so much to just talk about. And I wonder if we'll have the same perspective on this when it comes to cheating. But I think first, I want to, because this isn't a main part of things, because I think it's more, talking about the infidelity and emotion behind it. But I think one thing that I would like to talk about and just kind of address is just the thing of, her saying that this behavior she felt like stemmed from her parents or came from her parents and stuff like that. And I think, as I started to look back at my life, and Bree and I were talking about a certain situation that we were going through, and I was just like, man, it's just crazy how much our life is dictated by how our interaction with our parents was and how our parents are. I remember there being a story about like, there were two brothers, and of course they had the same father, and that father was an alcoholic, had dealt with domestic violence and all those things like that. And when it came to the two sons, one of the sons ended up just like him, and one of the sons was opposite. And when somebody asked both of them, how'd you end up how you are now, they both answered, with my father being who he is, how could I not be? So it's like, in that moment, you would either take on the behaviors and things of your parents, or you would see that and probably end up being the opposite and going the other way. But regardless, how they act, how they behave, from how they act towards you or what you see them acting as when you're a child, that truly impacts your life and the things that you do. But I will also say in that, to a lot of times learn to give your parents grace, because I feel like as kids, we grow up as we're born not knowing the difference between good and evil, right? That's truly what kids are. Like, they'll pick up a candy bar from a store, they don't know it's wrong. And we're all molded to believe things and think things and operate a certain way. And I have another story that, I heard this story of like, this guy was married to this woman, and she was going to put the ham in the oven, and she cut it in half, And he was like, yo, why do you cut the ham in half to put it in the oven? And she was like, that's just how you do it. And he was like, where'd you get that from? And she was like, that's how my mother always did it. And then, he called his mother-in-law, was like, yo, my wife is cutting the ham before she put it in the oven. Like, why do you do that? And she was like, that's how my
mom
mom
did
always
it.
did it.
Yeah.
And then luckily the great grandmother was around. So he was able to call her and he was like, hey, like my wife doesn't, my mother-in-law said they do it. Why do you cut the ham in half in order to put in the oven? She was like, oh, back in the day, the ovens weren't big enough to actually put the whole ham in. So we just used to cut it.
Yeah.
And then that's how we put it in. But that's like 3 generations of doing something.
Yes.
And 2 generations don't even know why they're even
just
doing
emulating.
it. They just emulating what they had saw before. And that's the thing you have to understand with your parents, is that you may be emulating some behavior that you saw from your parents, but instead of, condemning them, sometimes you got to give them some grace and was like, what was the environment that they grew up in
Yeah.
and what were they being taught?
Sure.
And you have to look at it less about condemning them and being mad and more seeing it as an opportunity to break a generational cycle.
Yeah.
It's like, now that I recognize and see what I'm doing, how do I now try to shift my behavior so that when I start having children and when I start being an influence or inspiration to the people who are looking at me, how do I shift my behavior to make something different or to, change the behavior for generations to come? So I just wanted to put that out there because I know this isn't the meat of the scenario, but just learn sometimes, we like to blame our parents for a lot of things. And I think as you become an adult, you start to understand your parents a lot more, and the dynamics of their relationships a lot more. And that was one thing my stepdad preached at my grandmother's funeral, was that she did the best she could with what she had.
That's correct.
And that's a lot of our parents. They love us, but even the times politically, the times in life, like things are just different.
Yeah.
And you don't know what shaped them. So just give your parents some grace and don't try to, lay everything on them or blame them for, the way that you are.
Absolutely.
You can recognize those things and try to work on it. Maybe it's working on it with them, but give them some grace.
Yeah. And I think Cody talked about that as well on her episode, that it's not, crazy to me. It's just crazy how it's interpreted. Like you used in that first story, that like 2 kids, same dad, but they had 2 different experiences, or they grew to be 2 different men. They had the same experience, grew to be 2 different men. But it's, yes, absolutely, our environments shape us no matter who raised you, because everybody wasn't raised by their parents. Some people were raised by grandparents or
for sure.
aunts, other family members. Those environments that you grew up in 100% shape you. They have to, no matter what you've done as an adult to work through them, talk through them, it has shaped you to be who you are, even down to the neighborhood you grew up in, the schools you went to, who your friends were, what sports you participated in, if any, what activities you participated in, if any, what you watched on TV. It's all shaping you. And once you become an adult, it doesn't stop. What you watch on TV, who you hang out with, where you work, who you work with, it's all continuing to shape you. And so environment, it matters. It plays a part, and everyone is not equipped with the ability to always reason, even once you're an adult, about what you should not do and what you should do. I when you were talking, I thought about Chris Brown. He talked about when he was, I cannot think of the name of his documentary, but it was what came out after the domestic violence situation with Brianna. And he talked about the fact that his mother was abused.
Yep. I remember hearing that.
Yes, his mother was abused by more than one man.
Yep.
And so for him to find himself in a situation where he had anger issues, and I'm not saying this because I'm a Chris Brown stan, I'm saying this because this is just true. Both him and Rihanna have acknowledged and admitted that they had a violent relationship.
Yeah.
They both were abusive to one another. Just that particular night, it just was the worst of it.
Yeah.
And he was more abusive in that situation. But he talked about being a child and hating seeing that happen to his mother and defending her many times. But then somehow, psychologically,
it's crazy how that happens.
We are chemical beings, like, and a lot of the things that we do, it's like you can't explain it. But that's the beauty of knowing, like, okay, something's happening, and that's that moment, that whole take a beat thing of like, okay, wait a minute. I know that if this happened when I was a kid and how I felt watching it, that's that reasoning where you have to be like, okay, no, that's not right. Even though I feel that feeling to do it, okay, that's like not okay. It's not right. I certainly did not grow up in a household where there was physical abuse, but I certainly grew up in a household where I heard arguments, things that I should not have heard.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it took me going through some of those same experiences as a young woman to know, like, cursing your boyfriend out or arguing like that is just not okay. You know, like, you can be upset, but it doesn't have to bubble up to that level. You don't have to hurl insults or say things that are very hard to apologize for. And so we all have to just continue to learn. You know, just because you become an adult, it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
You're basically just that child in a big form.
For sure.
With now responsibilities and bills.
No, I think you brought up a good point, which, you know, is something that I think is a main part of this, is just the emotions that come with, you know, having these conversations or dealing with these relationships. And I said this in the episode before, but, you know, I read in a book where I thought was like, boom, light went off. Is that, you know, we as humans are creatures of emotion and not logic.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that everybody needs to just kind of chew on and think about.
Yeah.
Because if you take that mindset into every interaction that you have with a person, it will change a lot for you and how you communicate, what your expectations are of people, how you receive things from people. And just to give you some context, just to understand, like, what is that? I'm logical. You know, I'm logical. The person I'm with emotional, but I'm logical.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm going to tell you the difference. A calculator is a logical creature or thing, right? If you type in 2 + 2, every single time, type in 2 + 2 100 times, it's going to give you 4.
Yeah.
Because that's logic. It's no emotion in a calculator. It's nothing that can sway it from 2 + 2, 4, 2 + 2, 4. Try asking a person 100 times what 2 + 2 is. You may not even get to 20 because after a while, I was like, why you keep asking me this?
Like, yeah, like, what's up?
What's up?
You
Like,
get on my nerves. What you need?
What you need?
Did you not hear me the first time or the second time?
Why? Because it's emotion. Like, you're not going to be able to get to that point. Or what they say with lawyers, like, what's 2 + 2? Somewhere in between 3 and 5. Like, it's like, I'm not.
I mean, it depends. Is this just a number? Is it a factor?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, let's say I did want to get a person to answer that 100 times. Now I got to start to think like, all right, humans are emotional beings and not logical beings. Maybe I can incentivize this person. Maybe if I give them $100 and say if they do this, then that will contribute to that. Or maybe if I challenge them and say nobody got to 100, like, you start to play on emotions of how to get them to do it, because we're emotional people.
Yeah.
We're not logical people, and we can't like remove emotion from decisions. It's just who we are.
Yeah.
So just think about that every interaction you have with a person, that we are truly primarily emotional beings.
Yes, who have the capability to reason through logic.
Rationale and logic, but that's not our native core who we are. Because every relationship, I talk to people about this all the time, every relationship advice or thing in theory sounds like easy, simple. Yeah. All I gotta do is do this. Communicate.
Yep.
But once you in it,
totally different story. It's literally the difference between the tea bag being inside of the box and the tea bag being in the cup with the hot water on it.
Exactly.
You're gonna have two different experiences. They both are tea bags. But when you put one under the pressure and all of the things, you get a different thing. Now you have tea. You don't have tea leaves. You have a beverage, you know?
Exactly.
So it's so incredibly true. And it is a really good point and a starting point for the scenario, because that is, I guess, somewhat the catalyst to then the next thing, to then the next thing. So it matters. And I think it much certainly needed to be said, most certainly needed to be said, because we all need to be really cognizant of that sometimes we think how we are is something that we picked up on yesterday or from college. And sometimes you have to go all the way back. I know if you watch the show all the time, you've heard me say this, that when I first went to therapy, I was going for one thing. And the doctor was like, we gonna go all the way back.
Peel back these layers.
Talk to me about you, little Rhonda, when she was 3 and 4, and who was in your household, and your daddy wasn't there. What was that like? Yeah, then it was like, oh my, oh no, oh my God, here we are. All right, so yes, reach back. You got to reach back. So Miss Anonymous picked up emotional abuse essentially from her household, being told that she wasn't good enough by her parents. Which, like, Lord, sometimes you ever just have a moment where you read someone else's thing and you like, you gotta just call your mama and be like,
Thank you.
thank you for not doing that to me. You definitely gave it to me sometimes, but it was really in discipline because I was making a bad decision. Like, you cannot do that, you will get in trouble. But never like, you're stupid and you aren't great and you are an idiot and an f up, you know. Like,
For
my mom
sure.
never talked to me like that.
And then I could imagine too, like, especially like my parents were divorced ever since I can remember. Your mom and dad were in the situation that they were in too.
Yeah.
Like, I could imagine at some point our moms possibly was like, yo, I just wish this like wasn't a thing, or like,
Yeah.
you know, that I would have just waited, or, you know,
Yeah.
but to never make you feel that
Yes.
is just like, thank you.
No, so grateful. Like, so grateful. So just, you know, sincere is, I'm glad that she's working on it, but like, I just, that broke my heart. It always
Yeah.
breaks my heart when I hear that children grew up in environments where they weren't celebrated, where they weren't encouraged, even through making mistakes, that they weren't encouraged, that they were literally emotionally abused. And most abusers, whether emotional or physical, oftentimes experience that at some point in their childhood.
Yeah.
It's almost always, I believe the percentages are like between 80 and 90% of abusers have experienced abuse. But now you find yourself in a relationship where you are doing this to your man. And you know, I'm not a double standard person, too tough. You know, I like to believe that for the most part we're a lot more alike than we are different. And emotional abuse is not ever okay.
No.
But I feel like as a woman, I can only speak to it from my lens. I do think that emotional abuse, or saying certain things to men, even when you are very dissatisfied with them or you don't like what they're doing, I think that it is such a catalyst for cheating, right? So
Yeah.
not an excuse, not a get out of jail free card, right? But I think that if he even has a slight potential thought to do it, telling him that he's never going to measure up to you, never going to be good enough for you, he's a F up nonstop. I think when you start saying that, it's very much giving like the probability increases of his decision. If he's not going to leave you, he's more likely than not going to start to veer off. And whether that's to go and get emotional validation or to get physical validation, that ultimately leads to emotional validation. Because, and I'm this is actually about to be a question to you. Would you say in your experience that you develop emotional validation before getting married through physical, or emotional first and then physical?
Do I valid? What do you define as like emotional validation? I guess.
Like you feel good about yourself, like you feel smart, talented, sexy, hot, things that are like happy, you feel good. Like, do you get that? Did you get that primarily through physical validation, like having sex, having physical intimacy? Or was it necessary for you to get it verbally and then that's when it felt good to do it physically? Because I've always experienced men get it physical. Like, physical is what helps develop the emotional side.
Got you. I would say for me, it possibly verbal. Because sometimes, just like I've said this before and on the show, is that sometimes just knowing you could do something just makes you feel good. Like, even if you don't go through it, or if you don't actually, let's say, have sex with somebody, just knowing that you could have, or somebody gave you a compliment, or somebody talked about, like, you know, what they would have liked to do, or what they felt like could have been done. Just kind of gives you a little bit of validation that's like, oh, like,
Okay.
I am somebody who looks good, or I am somebody who brings something to the table. But what about you? Do you feel like you say you feel it?
I think when I was younger, like college age, like I was in a relationship half of the time I was in college. So, you know, and we started dating when I was in high school. That was much more of an emotional connection first. That just also obviously had a physical element to it. But as I've matured, definitely emotional, then that led to physical. And I find that both are necessary for sure in like a long lasting situation. But anytime I feel emotionally devoid, I cannot necessarily have physical interaction. Like it's very hard for me. Where I know some people are like, I can be 100% mad at you. Like we are not good emotionally.
Yeah, I'm not that person.
But I'm gonna need this to get handled.
I'm not that person. I can't be emotionally not there and then still do something physically with you.
Yeah.
I'm not that person.
Yeah. And so we're very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't now. Like it's just way too like one, even if we're not like in a bad place, but if it's like a new situation, even if I'm very physically attracted to you, the days of me just being able to be like, this is a carnal, fully fleshy thing, I'm gonna just do that. I can't. Like I have to talk to you.
Yeah, and I think it's also, when I look back at my life, I guess when I did do the purely physical thing, it was more when I was younger. But I think it's tied to your emotional investment with the person too, right? Because I remember in college, I would do stuff with girls. And like I've told people on this podcast that the reason I started waiting for marriage, because I wanted to have a certain level of intentionality.
Yeah.
But what kind of prompted the switch was that, I was sleeping with women that I didn't even want to stay over the next day because I didn't really like them like that. It was just like a physical, just like
physical.
boom, whatever. And then like now that it's over, it's like, all right, I'm about to go about my day, my night, how I want to do it. I ain't really need you to be here or really want you to be here.
Yeah.
So I think that, like you said, it's that emotional investment that you have in a person that now when I look at my relationship with Bree, it's like because the emotional investment is so heavy that I can't, if we're not good in an emotional state, I can't do the physical.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think like what made me feel like most men, and I could be wrong, and I'm okay with that. But I think about like how when a man wants to, or maybe you're in a relationship, right? And you're like even for me, let me use my own old relationship. When sex started to become a challenge, our ability to physically connect started to be a challenge. It caused a lot of turmoil for him emotionally. He felt like I did not love him as much as I said I did. He felt like, I didn't like him. I didn't value him. I didn't appreciate him because we were not having sex. No matter how much I said I appreciated him, I told him I loved him, I did all the other things. I'm cooking, I'm like washing your clothes, I'm being there for you, I'm rooting you on with your projects at work. Because we were not having sex as often, he was like, yo, like I feel like you don't, it wasn't just that he needed to have sex. It was that he felt like I didn't love him. Where me, I feel like, and even women, it's like, I love you. We just had sex. And it's like, no, but I need you to tell me that. I need you to tell me you love me. You tell me you appreciate me. It's like sometimes women really are just way more emo.
Well, I think that just goes into love languages too, right? That's where that plays
so
in. And that's something that I had to learn because I remember maybe like 2.5 years into Brie and our relationship, I remember she used to just tell me like, like I don't, like I know you love me. I know you love me, right? But I just like the feeling, I don't feel it all the time. And in my head, I'm like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I'm thinking, and it wasn't until I read the book, The 5 Love Languages, and I was like, light went off.
Yeah.
I'm showing love the way I receive love.
The way you receive love.
And not the way that she receives it. So she's a physical touch person. And for those who understand a partner who is a physical touch or love language, their love language is physical touch, it's not sex, right? It's like when we're out, holding hands. It's like when I'm sitting next to you, your hand on my leg. Like those things make somebody feel like, oh, like this person loves me, or this person around me, or when this person surrounds me, they make me feel love. And you could be buying things, you could be taking care of things, you could be cleaning up behind them, you could be doing all these things. But if they don't feel love in that way, they're never going to,
they're not going to fully register.
It's not going to fully register. So I had to learn that with the love languages, that you have to learn your partner's language in order for them to, receive the love that you're giving them. And you have to give it in the way that they receive it.
For sure. I did want to read this statistic because I thought it was really interesting to this story, that in the CDC in 2011, they did a survey. And they defined emotional abuse as acting angry in a way that seems dangerous, also included being told that you're a loser or a failure by your partner, being insulted or humiliated, or some other form of coercive control. And 48.8% of men had experienced that type of abuse in their relationship by some partner in their lifetime.
Yeah. See, I can't wait till y'all watch the next guest episode, because I feel like a lot of what we just talked about, we had talked about in some way. And one thing that we had talked about in our next one that's coming up is like, what's a common misconception that women have about men is that men are a lot softer than what women actually give men credit for. Like, we are sensitive, we are soft. And when you say these things, I feel like sometimes you do it because you feel like we can take it.
Yeah.
And we're able to just like, bring it in and just be like, we're good. Like, I'm tough. But no, those things hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I talked about this on a previous episode to where we talked about your partner can't be your therapist. So meaning that you can't give your partner all your raw thoughts and emotions before you had the time to process it, because once they hear those things, they can't unhear that. And that's always going to be in their head and in their mind. I know when Bree and my relationship with Bree, it's like there's certain things when early on before she started doing therapy that she said that still stick with me in my head today.
Yeah.
Like, I know that she has gone backtracked, said she didn't know what she was feeling, but because she said those things, they're still there.
Yeah.
Like, I've forgiven her, but I haven't forgot. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So you have to be careful when you're saying certain things to your partner first before you even had the time to process it. And that goes back to why it's called emotional abuse, and like it's an act of emotion. You're not truly thinking about what you're doing. But also a point that you had said earlier, which I had learned in high school. I remember a guy came and spoke to our high school. And one of the biggest lessons that I took away from that and I always remember is that whenever you take an action, you can't control the consequences.
That's right.
And that's something that we always think we can. We always, whenever we take an action, we try to forecast what the possibilities could be, right? If you go down the street, smack a person in the face, you might think either they could punch me back, or they might run, or they might complain, or they might call the cops, and you might do like 5 or 6 scenarios. But it could be 12 or 20 or 50. That person could let you go. Follow you home. Like, it's so many different things that you wouldn't even think of. So it's like whenever you take an action, like I said, in this case, it's emotional abuse, saying something to a person, verbal abuse. You might think, oh, the only reactions that could possibly happen from this is this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Oh, but when somebody starts cheating on you, now that's just like, oh, that's
wait
just,
a minute, you brought a gun to a knife fight.
You cannot do that. But you got to think also the action that you took and what you contributed to that consequence now taking place.
Yeah.
It's like you can't behave any type of way you want and only want to have the consequences be X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
Once you take an action, you open up the door to whatever that reaction could possibly be. And not saying that some people don't overreact, or some people don't
take it too
far.
Quote,
yes,
unquote.
that's true. But sometimes without that initial action or trigger or lighting that fuse, whatever came from after that would not have happened.
That's right. It's so funny. Weren't we just talking about
we
that?
We were just talking about that.
Off mic. At a whole different situation. It made me think about what you were saying, like with Bree, like when that happened, or maybe not just when that happened, but at any other time. Have you ever had that experience where you said something that you needed to walk back, or you said something hurtful that you needed to like apologize for or unpack? Or have you been able to like fully avoid going through that or experiencing that with your partner?
Yeah, I've definitely done that. Not, I would say, from an emotional abuse standpoint, maybe more from a half-truth standpoint, to where you go down a rabbit hole of a half-truth and then it really don't make sense, and you like, yeah, I gotta walk this back because I wasn't really telling the truth.
Got it.
But that's also the same type of effect that I'm talking about, because if you tell a half truth without necessarily thinking about, like, what would be the consequences of this action if I get caught in this lie or this thing that's untrue, me telling that half truth to her will always be in the back of her mind, right? Yeah. So anytime I'm telling her anything now moving forward, it's always going to be like, is he telling the truth, so or is he lying a little bit in this situation? So I think the moral of the story is just, before you say things to your partner, especially if you're in a point to where you're being critical of your partner, you need to make sure that you're thinking that through.
Yeah.
First, figuring out how you're going to address it and communicate it, because we always talk about how important effective communication is. But make sure that if you are going to be super critical, that you have really digested, thought about it, talked to somebody about it, played out all the different scenarios in your mind, and this is truly how you feel. Because if you say something super critical and then you come to find out like that's not actually how I feel, and it was just an emotional response, then I feel like that thing will kind of hunt you in your relationship.
Absolutely. And I don't know. And I ask that because, you know, I share and am very honest that I've definitely said things that I had to apologize for, things that I'm sure stuck like hot rice, like just it was always in the back of this person's mind because I said it, because I was upset or frustrated. And so I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. So, you know, not to excuse it because it's wrong for you to do that, because like you said, words hurt. I just reposted a clip from Black Love. I think her name's Keita, where she said like words are weapons. They are. The Bible says the tongue is a sword. It can hurt, it can cut. And so great advice that you need to take a beat, but just know that a lot of people young in love, because she's 23. Y'all been dating since you were 18. You haven't experienced a lot of life. And sometimes, especially based on the household you grew up in, but even just childlike behavior usually comes with tantrums and emotional recklessness because you're not emotionally intelligent enough. So you're not, I would say you're in good company, but I'm glad that you are learning this lesson and that you learn this lesson so that it's something that you don't continue to drag on, whether it's in this relationship or any other relationship, that once you say things, they're very hard to come back from. A lot of things are very, very hard to come back from. Go ahead.
No, to that point, you know, as I'm thinking about it more and more, there are hard truths that I wish I didn't say the way I said it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I saw a Instagram reel where it's like a guy, he was like, it was a really short clip. And it was a guy, he like looked at his wife and she was like, had a mean face on. And then he looked at her and then he was about to say something and he just started smiling and laughed and walked away. Cause he was like, and the thing said something like, when you got a bomb in your head that you know is going to just break up the relationship, but you right about it.
Yeah.
And you just like walk away and
let me
be like,
not even go
let
there.
me not even do it. But I've had those moments to where it's like, sometimes you could tell I got this thing in my head and I know I'm right. But this joint is going,
you can't say it.
Escalate it and it's going to blow it up. And there's times where I said those things and it's like, whoo. Or, you know, it could be calling somebody out on, say for instance, in this situation, or in a relationship dynamic, you could easily make more money than your man. All right. But if you try to use that in an argument in a way that's going to like really demean him or make him feel like he will never be enough, essentially. That will blow up everything depending on the energy and how you say that.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
You broke ass, like, you know.
Yeah. I'm basically your mother.
Like those things, right? It's like, is there some truth? Maybe.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, because one of the things she said to him was, you always effing up. Maybe he really was. Doesn't mean it's okay just because it's a hard truth. It is really learning the packaging. It is really saying, you know, always effing up. I'm gonna just use a quick example. You know, you always effing up. The better way to say that is, you know, love, you know, we've been working on some things, and I know that we're growing in our relationship, and we started when we were really young, and now we're in the swing of our careers. This is a little sandwich effect. You line up all these good things, and I'm so proud of you. You got this new job, and I know you're really busy. But, you know, I've just noticed consistently, you know, over and over and over again, we're just having to revisit kind of the same things, or just a lot of mistakes are happening. And I just want to talk through that, because maybe it's coming from somewhere. Maybe work has you distracted and you're just not paying as much attention to it. Maybe it's more important to me than it is to you, because we're individuals. And what I think is everything, you might not think is nothing. But I would really like for us to work on that so that we don't keep running into this issue. Can we set aside some time, or can we sit down now and like really talk about it? Because I'm starting to get very frustrated.
Exactly.
I know that was way more words, But I heard this woman say, I will never allow anybody to be sweeter to my man than me. And if this is a man that I want to be with and I want to spend the rest of my life with, if I've got to put together 50 words to soften that blow than just wildly reacting to it because I'm just mad in this moment, I will do that 100 times over because he's worth it to me. I don't want to be his enemy. I don't want to be a disruptor of his mindset or his peace of mind. I want to handle him with care because he means that much to me. So I'm okay with taking the long route to it as often as I need to in order to massage that. And also, most importantly, it's because that's how I would want to be handled.
For sure.
I would want to be handled with that type of care and concern because you don't want to drop me. I'm fragile. I don't want to drop you. So if we both are working on that type of Ferris wheel, communication to me just flows better. We're talking through being understood and not just proving a point. So yeah, I'm always going to take the softer approach.
For sure. And I think in this scenario and what I see with a lot of people, which is a true double standard, right, is that you put more weight on emotional infidelity than you put on emotional abuse.
That,
It's like, oh, so the emotional infidelity is just uncalled for. You can't do that. Who you talking to?
Now we getting into the meat of it.
Who you doing all these things with and talking and discussing personal business. But the emotional abuse was just, I'm just telling you how it is. You can get over that. Let's move it. Let's talk about physical abuse. If somebody was hitting you and punching you and doing all those things, you wouldn't just see it as, oh, that's something you can get over. You can take it. That's cool. Like, and you wouldn't be like, if that were to happen and you heard somebody after getting physically abused, cheated physically with somebody else, you'd be like, well, I mean, he was punching her the whole time. Like, he was kicking her, hitting her with stuff the whole time. So I'm not surprised that he cheated.
Yeah.
But when you emotionally abusing somebody, when they emotionally cheat, now you're like, how could you?
How could you do
What
that?
in the world? Like,
I can't believe you.
have you ever had somebody you love that you're supposed to be in partnership with tell you that you will never be enough for them?
Who God?
What am I doing here?
I never had somebody say it to me, but I've had somebody treat me that way for sure, which is still rolled into that emotional piece. And when I tell you again, gutted, I think I would almost have rather been hit. True, like punch me, like or pinch me, like I could
Push me a little bit,
yeah,
you know.
like I don't want that either.
Yeah, but like,
But that emotional, verbal, that is like it's like it stays in your brain.
especially when you speak in absolutes, because that's the thing is that when you go to the absolute, you will never, you always, like those words is like, well, I guess I'm just the worst person in the world.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I guess I'm horrible.
Yeah.
Why are you even with me?
Yeah, why I can't amount to nothing. And he said that to her. Like, I basically started engaging in this way with my friend because I knew that I could make at least one person happy. Like, damn, like that is so that absolute of what you're saying to him is now becoming an absolute in his world. I'm sure that there are plenty of people in his life that he probably makes happy. Like, if he has parents, I bet he probably makes them happy. He probably have some homeboys. They enjoy his company. He makes them happy. But because you are the one person that he cares the most about making happy, you're consistently saying he's never doing that. Now he feels like, well, I gotta go and make some woman happy. And again, it's not okay. We're not excusing it, and we're gonna get into the meat of that. But I'm glad that she came to terms with it, that what she did absolutely played a massive part in his need for the validation from somewhere else, to the point that he didn't even have to sleep with that girl, to the point that he didn't even have to physically be in her presence at all.
Exactly.
Just that little bit of, I'm gonna send you cute pictures of me from the back in my gym clothes, and she's very attractive, and I tell her she's pretty, and I bet she gives off this reaction. He only had to do this little teeny bit to get something from her. But whatever he is doing or not doing is just the worst thing to you. And so here he is in the text messages of someone that was his friend, that you knew was his friend, which is now tearing up that situation, right? Because this is his friend that he probably really was just homegirls with. But because he's dealing with this at home with you, now he morphing that into something else. And he not only has jeopardized his relationship, but he's most certainly lost his friend.
For sure.
Because now the stipulation to be back in a relationship with you is now she got to go. It's just you just like you said, it just blew up. It's blowing up the whole thing. It's blowing up the whole thing. It really, really is. You hit the nail on the head though. God dang it. What's your cat? Send me your cash app so I can send you an offering about that. The kind of minimizing and diminishing the emotional and verbal abuse that happened here. And Anonymous, you're not gonna like me for this right here. But I do think it's a bit what's the word I want to use? I think it's a bit unfair for you to feel like what he did and only what he did is the grave mistake. What he did is so, unconscionable. Like you are in such turmoil about his decision to have inappropriate text conversations with someone. And while you keep saying you understand that what you did was very wrong, your questions to us aren't really about how you can get over how you played a massive part in his ultimate decision to have a emotional affair with his friend. It's really about you can cut your losses. You young, you can move on, and I get it. If you can't get over something, you should let the person go. I really do get that. But I think you are downplaying your role in this. I think you are not fully coming to terms with how much what you said and what you did, even if he was messing up, even if he was not always making you happy. You are downplaying that much too much. And I think if you really want to be with this man, it's almost like you got to take a few steps back and really sit with yourself, and not continue to, I don't know what else you need from him, because he's even done so much work. I mean, like, he's made his phone fully available to you. He cut his friend off, all things he should do. He is in therapy, processing his things. I don't know. Did she mention that she went to therapy or that she just came to terms with it?
I think she said she came to terms with it.
Okay, so I don't know if you're in like he's in therapy to control his anger issues and frustrations. Are you in therapy to deal with your anger issues and frustrations? Because you calling saying he's F up and all of that, that's something that you need to be managing as well. So it looks like he's doing a lot of the work to recalibrate the relationship. You said that in 4 months, he's a much better partner. Yes, you stopped saying the bad things, but the mindset is where I'm finding a lot of concern, that you don't think that you are equally as responsible for the place that you all have found yourself in. And in my lens, you are. I know we say, cheating is a personal decision. It's a personal choice. No matter what's happening to you, you shouldn't cheat. But let's be realistic. We're people. And like you said earlier, your action results in a reaction that you cannot always control. That may not be the decision that you would have wanted him to make. So yeah, like, wasn't the best decision on his part, but definitely wasn't the best decision on your part.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Like I said, we had to take responsibility for every action that we take. And I think it's unfortunate, like Rhonda said, I think that if you haven't gone to therapy, that you definitely should. Because I feel like there's this thing, which a lot of people do, is they feel like if they're honestly saying something, then that should absolve them of any and all responsibility of what those consequences could be or would be, because what you said you feel like is true and it's honest and it's actually happening. But the thing I like I said with absolutes and why you shouldn't speak in that way, because I guarantee you it's not as great as probably what you're making it seem, like always, never, all these different things. But we have talked about this a lot in different episodes, is sometimes you got to give your partner some space to make improvements. And then you also have to celebrate them when they make the improvements. Like, if nobody wants to be in a relationship to where they feel like they could never satisfy the person that they're with. That's horrible. Like, you feel like everything you do, every effort you put in, it's just in vain
Never
because it's
enough.
never enough. Nobody's going to stay in that relationship. Or if they do stay in that relationship, they probably won't stay committed in that relationship because nobody wants to be in any situation like
Yeah.
that. And if you're fostering an environment like that, what do you expect from somebody who's
Yeah.
dealing with that? You're like, literally, you're beating that man down.
You definitely did.
You're beating him down, beating him down, beating him down. And then when he tries to find an outlet because he doesn't seem to be able to find it with you, now you're upset and say, like, how could you? Come on.
Like come on, like you put you put the situation in very hot water. It's like that whole greater sin, lesser sin. You know, when you think spiritually, the Bible definitely says no sin is greater than the other. And I know in our carnal human world that's not the case. Like killing someone is in fact worse than cutting somebody off in traffic or using a curse word. But sometimes in relationships, it's really not about what you did, it's how it fell upon the person you did it to. So while you feel like, well, I used a few words and that really hurt your feelings and that really challenge your masculinity or your manhood, and that was bad, but what you did was mess around in text messages with your friend, and so I feel like my pain is worse. You don't get to determine that. You can only speak to your pain. You cannot speak to his pain. You do not know what his pain was like because you are not in him, and he could never fully. He could try. We can all try, but you ever just been in so much pain you can't even, like, I can't explain it to you. Like, I'm just so hurt that, like, here's the little bit of words that are available to me in the English language, but the only way you could really feel this is if you were in my body. And sometimes we have to really think about that. This is not a pain Olympics.
No.
If you caused pain and hurt and they reacted with pain and hurt, you both have to figure out how to get to a better place. And I think the work is being done. And I think this relationship could in fact be saved, except for the fact that if you truly cannot forgive to a point of release, it is probably best to release him. I've said this in probably more than one episode, that sometimes too much happens in a relationship and you can't recover from it. It could have been one incident, but because of how it fell upon you, you cannot bounce back.
Yeah.
Some things just happen that make it impossible to come back from. If that's really where you are with this, like you said what you said, and then he did what he did, and now no matter how much time or how much he's proven to you that he's better, you really still can't drop it, then yes, like you should walk away. You really should, and start fresh somewhere else where hopefully you don't have to deal with that.
For sure. And I think when it comes to infidelity, what I'm learning and what you learn as you get older, first you understand how common it is in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Whether it's emotional or physical, you understand, you begin to understand what leads people to those actions.
Yeah.
But one thing I'll say, because there are a lot of people who have recovered from infidelity, who have to recover from infidelity. And I think it's really you looking at the situation and their actions and saying, was this done out of retaliation or desperation? And I think that that's two different things. Like, retaliation is really you did something and they're purposely like, yo, F that person, I'm gonna get you back. This is revenge for how you treated me, versus desperation, which is like, this aspect of my life, like I want it from my person, but I'm just not receiving it, and I don't know what else to do. I don't want to leave, but I need this. And I think that in this situation, it seems less of him retaliating for doing that, like, yo, you talking to me crazy, I'm gonna do this, versus like, I just need emotional support and feel like I'm satisfying somebody, so I'm kind of desperate, and I can't, like you said, I don't even have to physically be with this person.
Yeah.
I'm grasping at crumbs. Like, I just need a little something to satisfy me as a human being, not just looking at me as a man who can just withstand everything. As a human being, I need that emotional support, or somebody who's there with me emotionally. So I think it's important to understand that, because then you can start to, as you repair, maybe that can be easier in your effort to forgive somebody, if you see what was really behind their choice to do it.
And like you said, it's not uncommon. Again, it's not okay, but I think it said like 35 to 40% of unmarried couples experience infidelity of some sort. That's almost half. That's a lot. You know, it's not excusing it. It's not saying you should expect it. It still is wrong and it needs to be addressed appropriately. And especially, at least for me, I feel like especially when you are in a young relationship, like you all have been together since you were 18. This is probably like really your first adult relationship. And I'm not the type of person that says, y'all need to go out and live. Y'all need to go out and be with other people. I don't necessarily believe in that. Some people need that, but some people do not. But you are really learning everything about love and relationship with one person.
Yeah.
And to me, in that type of space, mistakes, the probability of having certain mistakes or experiencing certain things, I think they're high. I really do.
Oh, for sure.
Like when I was 22, 23, man, having to be fully responsible for my emotions, going through the motions of my man who maybe will be my husband and him growing and developing, all while figuring out student loan debt, getting into a new career, figuring out when we're going to live together because we both probably still live at home. That is so much to try to manage all at one time at such a young age. So you because you're emotionally underdeveloped, you can do the laziest, easiest things for outlets. Cheating is certainly one of them. It's easy. It's not hard to cheat.
For sure.
It's also really not hard to physically cheat if the person that you're talking to is in town.
For sure.
So the fact that he didn't take it there, I'm not saying he deserves a pat on the back, but girl, they cheat for less is what I'm saying. They cheat because she's cute, not because you're even being mean to them. So yeah, I don't know.
And I will say one thing, I know I experienced when being young as you have, I always tell people this, is like, yo, when you're 17, you like, yo, you know, I got it figured out. When I was 16, I was doing stuff dumb, but now I got to understand
Got
it.
it at 17.
Then when you get to 18, you like, dang, the stuff I did when I was 17 was stupid and dumb. But now I'm 18, so I get it. I understand what needs to go. I learn my lessons. Then you get to 19, you like, shoot, man, what I did at 19, like, I would never do that again. And it's like a constant thing so I know at that young age, a lot of times what we had talked about at the beginning of this episode is that, you know, you do the best you can with what you know. But in those moments, especially at 18, 19, I know that feeling at that age, you feel like you kind of know it all and got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And in your mind, because you don't have true experience and love in a real relationship, you have these theories based off of what you saw, whether that's via TV, whether that's via other relationships that you've seen, whether your mom, dad, aunt, uncle, and you sometimes have these hard views on how things should be. I remember in college, I was like, yo, a woman need to cook, a woman need to do, like, all these different things that I had these view or how you need to operate in certain situations. So I had my girlfriend at the time on such a high pedestal at that point to where if she didn't meet these requirements or do these things, I thought she was wrong. And guess what? I did not stop or hesitate to tell her, you're wrong. You need to learn how to do these things. You need to do this like this. You need to do that like that in order to be the woman that a man would want to be with long term. And this is all theory because I had never experienced this really.
Right.
And it's like I ended up, and I talked about this last episode where I had to go back to her and apologize.
Yeah.
Once I became 20 and realized the stuff I did when I was 19, I didn't know what I was doing.
I ain't know what the hell I was saying, man.
What I was talking about. But I got educated by my stepdad, who was much older than me, on how these things should happen and how but that's a person who has experience.
For sure.
And he was able to school me on it. And luckily I was in a point to where I was receptive enough. And then once he started saying these things, it started clicking to me. And what he did, which I think really helped me out, was he was like, he used my mom as an example, because these things that I was saying about her, maybe because I had this image of how my mom was, that I put that and projected that on her. But when he started telling me, not necessarily revealing the flaws, but just revealing the human side of my mom. Yeah, your mom has cried about this and that. Your mom has done this. And it's like,
oh, wow.
huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's such a
Okay.
thing. I'm not gonna bust up your point, but when you learn that your parent isn't a superhero,
Yeah, right.
yeah, that's a thing. And not in a way that takes away from them. It's in a way that makes you appreciate the cape even more. It
Exactly.
makes you appreciate the fact that they appear to be a superhero under all of that. You think my mom is doing it all. She cooking, she got a job, she making sure we good, and it's like, but you didn't know that she was crying about that.
Yeah, I didn't know that the house almost got taken away, or we had to refinance, or the reason that we stayed with grandma wasn't because of this, it was because of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like all those things start to be revealed, and you're like, wow, this thought that I had of what even a relationship was, or what a woman should be, or how a woman should act, it's not necessarily false, but it's very glamorized
Yeah.
in my mind based off of what I saw. But without that experience, right, you don't know. So let's say, even when we've talked to so many guests on our show who shape their perspectives in life off of television, there's perspective on relationships. Imagine if Claire and
Heathcliff.
Heathcliff Huxtable were your example of a black happy married couple. Your expectation would be incredibly stupidly high because that's scripted television.
Yes.
All those experiences are scripted. The relationships between the kids and like all these things are glamorized. Not saying that they
Absolutely.
aren't based off of true
Yes.
experiences.
They imitate life.
They imitate life, but they're completely glamorized to be something that's fun, entertaining, and ultimately uplifting. But when you're young, because you don't have the experience to go along with the theories that you have, that theory is just so strong, and you can
it's Bible.
and I think that's what could happen in a situation like this. You dog the person that you're with for not being perfection, and it's like, you're not perfection, you're not perfection, you're not perfection. And then as you say that, you truly start believing it, and then at that time too, you have to be so careful, because at that age they could start believing that too, and then that affects how they then pursue life and show up. And let's say in this thing you're mending it and you were able to apologize, but what if he broke up and now moving forward, that's his mindset? I can't never trust a woman. I can't do this because
I'm a F up.
I'm a F up. I'm never gonna be enough. I'm not gonna be satisfied. Or all women, they just nag, and it's just like you can't never keep them happy. And now you not necessarily created this person, but now this person has this mindset going into life, treating women, operating with people in the future with this mentality. So it's like you have to, and this sucks because we've all contributed, I think, to people's trauma or behaviors because we just didn't know any better at a certain age. So it sucks, but you just got to try to be mindful when you're dealing with people. Because again,
they're fragile. We're fragile.
And like I said in the beginning, if you go into every human interaction knowing that we're emotional primarily, and then logical after that, then hopefully that will shape how you speak to people, how you talk to people, how you word things when you're interacting with people, because they can have long lasting effects. And I know that something like cheating is something that's still on the scale of serious to not serious, is not as serious, but like things like suicide, like all these things can come from words and how people portray certain things onto people. So just be careful when you're talking to people or being super critical or telling people that they're this or that, because a lot of things that we feel, and I'll get off my
it's a great soapbox,
but the only person that we can control in our life is ourselves.
That's right.
And Rhonda made a good point in this episode that a lot of times what you give is what you'll receive. And instead of all the time when somebody's doing something wrong, responding in anger or frustration, if you try to respond in grace and love, a lot of times you'd be surprised on what you'll end up getting back. More people are inclined to, you hear this with like leaders, they're more inclined to lead or to follow, to go along, to praise the leaders who lead with love. And versus the leaders who lead from fear. Because the moment that there can be an uprising or that there can be a thing or to where they can retaliate or get back, like fear is never the way, to lead. We talk about a healthy fear of losing something, but a healthy fear of losing something great is different than a fear of
harsh correction, extreme discipline, emotional or verbal abuse. That's very or physical in different situations. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. All I can say to that is really church. To answer her final question of is infidelity kind of it for them? Is there any possibility for their future, and are they past the point of no return? Truth be told, that's a question that you both have to work through. Those are questions that you guys have to work through together. From my perspective, do I think you all can work through this? Yes. And that is primarily because your partner is doing a lot of the work, and you also have committed to and have not repeated the behavior of wielding demeaning comments to him. So you both are going in the right direction. The only place, like I said, where I think it could be difficult is if you are holding resentment and you're still pretty fresh in this. This is new. You know, if getting over infidelity can take a significant amount of time. It can take on average 1.5 years or so for things to fully restore to where this is not a leading thing in your relationship. You're just 4 months outside of it. So I get why it's still a bit more fresh and new, and harder to navigate right now. But I think you really understanding the accountability piece for yourself, because it sounds like, and this is based on what you wrote in, so don't kill me, but it sounds like he has more of a grasp on his accountability and what he did to hurt you. She'd even said in the comments that were separate from the scenario that I read was that he would have been okay with her deciding to leave the relationship because he knows what he did was wrong and she didn't deserve it. Just even the fact that he articulated that to you and had come to terms with, yes, that's not what he wanted, but he would have respected your decision, to me says that he has a better grasp on accountability for his errors, and that you have a little bit of room for growth in that department. So I think you can work through it. But let's give yourself a little more time. And if you really just can't let it go, you really still see his mistake as worse than yours, you probably should go ahead and walk away. And maybe you both can flourish in different situations.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think sometimes in situations when we are super critical of our person, even maybe for infidelity, if you look through it and really dig down to the root of things, you might see that the grace that that person has offered you over the time of the relationship is a lot more than what you have ever given them.
Yeah.
Because the fact that that man is still here, still like, what can I do to fix it? He sees something in you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
even with all your imperfections, he's like, I don't want to leave this relationship because I feel like whether it's potential or what you could be or the person that you are when you show up in certain settings, it's something about you that he sees as valuable.
Yeah.
In spite of everything that you have done. So don't write the man off completely, because I know we've seen situations where people gone out, like do their own thing.
Yeah. I like the friend better anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, whew.
But the fact that he's like trying to make it work is like, yo, whatever you need to be comfortable,
I'm going to give it to you.
Let me know.
I'm going to reassure you. Here's my phone. Like, he's literally doing all the things.
Yeah. So I think that it's, like I said, you guys are young. And I think it's just a perspective switch. Like Rhonda said, if you just can't get over it, then you can't get over it. And this will just be a lesson for future relationships. Yeah. But I do think that there should be a slight, perspective shift in seeing that, this man does seem to love you and want to be with you and want to make it work. And just try to lead with love when it comes to a lot of these things. And please tell that man, because I don't even know the situation, but if you haven't told him that first apologize to him and let him know that it's not a never thing, that you will never be able to, make her happy, or that you're always like, apologize for that, because nobody has absolutes in life. To put somebody 100% at something is just false. I don't even got to know the situation.
Right.
It's just false. Like,
yeah.
It's just false. And what I learned about relationships too is that for everything we're critical of our partner about, they can be just as critical when it comes to certain things about us.
Indeedy. You're right, indeedy.
So it's like,
yes, God.
Don't put it all
Better
on him.
Find that mirror fast.
Exactly. So I know that there's some things that you probably do too, but it seems like he's offering a lot of grace, and I think that he deserves some as well. But
yeah, he's doing the work.
Listen, Rhonda and I will tell you if this is something that we ain't never seen.
Ooh,
we read a scenario that we didn't actually put on here. I don't even know if it was a scenario. It was a statement.
It was a statement. Baby just needed to get
A
that
memo,
out.
a public service announcement.
Yeah.
To where we was like, this is new.
I don't even know if we're gonna be able to do this one.
We'll tell you if it's something we ain't never heard before, or if it's something that's just rare or something like crazy. But this is normal relationship stuff. You guys can get through this.
I think so too.
It's just about healthy communication. And I think you have the opportunity when it comes to certain situations in your life to use this as a building block to make you stronger, or it can be something that, tears everything apart. So I think that you working through this, especially early on in your relationship, could be a good foundation for you guys to succeed in the future, because in order to get past this point, your communication is going to have to improve. The way you guys treat and show up for each other is going to have to improve. So if you make it through it, all those things would have got improved, which is going to ultimately help your relationship in the future anyways.
Yes. And my only last thing before we close is that maybe find a couple. I don't know if you guys go to church. I don't know if what your parents, situation was, and maybe it's grandparents. Maybe it's just, an older couple that has been in marriage and been in partnership for a significant amount of time. Potentially find relationship with them and see how they navigated it. Like it's worthwhile to hear someone else's experience, to say, listen, I know where you were because I was there 10 years ago and I wanted out and I couldn't stand them. And sometimes that really helps to give you a different amount of insight. So we so appreciate you writing and wishing you both all the best. And if you want to write in, you know where to find us, relationshiprestore.com. Click the contact button. Right into the show. Give us the deets. We like the deets. And you know what? We want to update. I want to update. So please update us. Also follow us on social media. I'm at Ronnie Cakes.
At It's Dre Smith.
And at Relationship Restored on all things, including TikTok.
For sure.
We'll see you next week.
If I get caught cheating, that don't mean I don't love you.
Y'all like that? We didn't plan that.